Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Lifetime Legacy Lawyer Podcast. I'm your co-host, Thomas Vick, joined by my co-host Seth Wilson. Seth, how are you today? How's your new year going?
Wonderful. It's always an exciting time to flip the calendar to a new page. Although I will say that once you've sort of built your plan on a year and you're close to accomplishing all of the goals that you had, or maybe far away, when it switches over and you have to start all the way over again, it is a little daunting sometimes to see, all those calculations and progress bars change on you when
Yes.
January
Yep.
moves over.
Yeah. All the progress from last year, it's completely washed away. Starting anew. So,
That's right. But that's an exciting time. It's great to be back recording with you. I know toward the end of the year, we both had fairly busy schedules. And one of the reasons for that was this back and forth with the beneficial ownership information reporting requirement. That's a mouthful under the Corporate Transparency Act. And so just wanted to give a quick update on that.
please.
That was sort of in front of the court, and we had talked about it a while back, where the court issued a nationwide preliminary injunction effectively pausing any reporting requirement by a business owner under this Corporate Transparency Act law. Then the government appealed, and it went through two different courts of appeals panels. So at first, the Court of Appeals said, "Oh, wait, we're going to take this away. You're going to have to report again." So unpausing the reporting requirement. And then a couple of days later, another panel of the Court of Appeal said, no, we're going to pause this because this is an important issue that we got to figure out and make sure that the constitutionality of this act is addressed in full. So go ahead and pause it again. And that's where we currently sit as of January 9th, 2025. So if you go to the Financial Crime Enforcement Network website, there's a statement on there, or the Beneficial Ownership Information Reporting website. You can kind of keep tabs on all of that. A word of caution here as well. If you search these things out in just a web browser, you may get taken to a site that's trying to sell you reporting services. That in and of itself is okay, but what they do is they highlight the penalties for failing to comply with this act to try to get you to buy their services. So just be aware that you want to go to the official websites for the Financial Crime Enforcement Network and or the Beneficial Ownership Information Reporting website, just to make sure you're getting up to date and accurate information.
Yeah. And Seth, how are you helping your clients through that?
It's a great question, Thomas, because what I've helped, I hope anyway, to communicate is, look, this is really a business decision because the requirement has not yet been removed. It's just been paused. And so right at this moment, it's a decision of comfort level for the client with, I have one more thing to think about or one less thing to think about if I just go ahead and file. So from a practical perspective, it's not terribly difficult to actually submit the information. The question, I think, for most folks, and if you read the case, is I shouldn't have to. I don't need to disclose this information. And so, again, that's a business decision that can be made. But the simplest way to do this is get what's called a FinCEN, stands for Financial Crime Enforcement Network ID. And it's effectively a login that you can utilize to attach all of your ownership information. So your name, your address, all the other pieces of data that they are wanting to collect, and assign that to sort of a unique identifier, almost like another type of social security number for you as a business owner. Then any businesses that you have ownership requirements to report on, whether you meet that definition under the act, you can use that ID against that business. And so you don't have to enter the information a bunch of times. You just put the ID in, file the report, and move along. So once you get the ID set up, which takes 10 or 15 minutes, then going through and registering your businesses, if you have multiple, only takes another 10 or 15 minutes. So it's not a huge time commitment. Again, it's more the principle of it and where you feel comfortable as a business owner, either providing that information or not.
Yeah. As for me, I decided I'm just going to get it over with. I did it before the preliminary injunction came out, so they got me before I even had that decision to make. But I felt like I just wanted to get it done, with the end of the year stuff, coming on. I just wanted to check the box, get it done, move on to other things. And you know, but I definitely understand the legal argument. The government doesn't have to know everything about the business. What is the role of proper government, all that kind of stuff, which has been interesting legal argument to follow along the way. But yeah, that's a good reminder as we are at the beginning stages of 2025 to check that box if you want to, or at least make sure there is a box to be checked, and you're following that news story along the way.
Yeah, and if anyone has any questions, feel free to reach out to our office. I've got some material that I put together that just outlines what steps need to be taken and how you can do that. And if you need an attorney to get involved with it, we're happy to help with it. But again, it's one of those scenarios where you got to figure out what your risk tolerance is and determine how to proceed accordingly. Because oftentimes, what happens with this type of law is all the people who it's not really meant to enforce against bear the burden of the few that may be doing nefarious things that the information would be helpful to uncover. So they're not going to want to report that anyway. So it affects those of us who try to do the right thing and follow the compliance process and make sure that we've got everything disclosed appropriately anyway. Just a very interesting thing. Again, if you haven't read that opinion and you have some interest in the law, constitutionality of issues, those kind of things, it is really a fascinating opinion and
Yeah.
fun to read.
Well, it being 2025, this is a time for when we're thinking about New Year's resolutions. Maybe you do those, maybe you don't. Uh, but 2025 might be a time to have a New Year's resolution to get a basic estate plan into place. And I was thinking we might use this time to talk about why do you need a will, at least a basic will, and what are the components of a basic will. I think that the wills that we do, they've got a little bit extra language for specific situations that are actually kind of foreseeable. But just a simple will, what goes into a will? Why do you need a will?
What a great question, Thomas. I mean, we've talked about it in the past, but as you mentioned, like the New Year's resolution or the goal or whatever outcome you have, it really is essential to have something in place because just as an attorney, just living life, you don't know how quickly something can change your life, and it's a matter of kind of a blink of an eye where something could happen. And so having that documentation in place in the form of a will is so important because it tells your loved ones that you've left behind what needs to happen and gives them authority to make those things happen. And so, from a simple, straightforward standpoint, that's essentially what a will does, which is a reflection of my wishes for the assets that I have, as well as instructions to close out any obligations or debts that I may have. And so that's kind of step one, especially if you're newly married or have a child. That's where that straightforward, simple, quote unquote, will is so important to name or nominate the guardian for the benefit of the care of the children or child, and a trustee to manage that fund or whatever funds may be there for that minor child. So those are really the core essentials I see in my practice.
Yeah, and I agree with you. It's directing how debts are to be handled and how assets are to be handled after an individual passes away. And, that component of having a guardian named in the last will and testament is so important so that, you know, you're sitting in a courtroom and the judge will know who is supposed to be the guardian. And, it may be that one set of grandparents is arguing to be guardian and the other set of grandparents is arguing to be guardian, and the parents who are now deceased actually wanted an uncle or an aunt to serve as guardian. So it really really critical to make sure that guardians are named in a last will and testament. And as you think about, young adults, they may not consider themselves to be rich enough to have a will, but if you've got a minor child, then certainly that is reason enough to get a basic estate plan into place. And alongside that, I'll just mention a power of attorney can name a guardian as well upon incapacity. So parents who have children, maybe they haven't died yet, but they're in an accident and they're, unfortunately not able to make decisions for themselves or for their children. A power of attorney will be able to direct who should be named as guardian in that situation. So that's not specifically about a last will and testament, but it's on the topic of guardianship and how to name somebody as guardian when there is a moment of, an event that causes incapacity for the parent.
Yeah, and so maybe it's just I'm getting older and I see this more frequently, but again, just that importance of this, your life can change in a second. Just slipping and falling on a sidewalk and hitting your head could put you unconscious. It could give you a concussion. It could give you some sort of longer term brain challenge to where somebody is going to need to manage those affairs for you while you're recovering. It should be a temporary incapacity, but during that time, there's going to be medical bills coming in potentially, or the mortgage still needs to be paid, or what have you. And so having that authority already in place makes such a big difference for navigating an already stressful and traumatic situation.
Yeah, and I think that the wills that we do are a little bit longer, but let me ask, what's the shortest will that you've ever seen?
A page and a half, 2 pages.
Yeah, that's kind of what I've seen as well. I think the older wills are the ones that are the shorter wills in my experience. They're the ones that you take out the envelope and it hasn't been opened ever and it's 40 years old and it's 2 pages, but it has what you need. It states who, and specifically this is one that we haven't really talked about yet, but it states who is to be the executor or who is to be the personal representative. And that role is the role of settling the estate. So a personal representative doesn't become personal representative just because they're named in the will, but they're the person that, kind of like with the guardianship, the judge will say, okay, this decedent, this one who has recently passed away, wanted so and so to be personal representative and handle financial affairs of the estate. And then the court will appoint that person to serve. And then, that personal representative will be able to go and gather assets and pay off debts and all that kind of stuff in the estate administration. But if you don't have that, then there's a kind of a list of who can request to be, who gets preference as to who serves as the personal representative. But you're leaving it up to the judge to decide ultimately, and you need to have that specified in a last will and testament so that the judge knows.
Yeah, and again, it's just I get into court fairly regularly, and once you put the decision in the hand of somebody else, they don't necessarily know you, they don't know the family, they get to interact with you on a very limited time frame and try to make decisions that are going to really have a big impact potentially on your life in your family's life. And so the more clarity you can have, which is why I think you and I both take a little bit different drafting approach now than maybe was done years ago, because now we're writing almost for the next level, not just our clients, but those who are going to be carrying out the client's wishes, and to give them as much instruction as possible to say, yeah, this is clearly what we would like to have done in the event that this occurs.
Yeah, and one example of that, we're kind of branching off of simple wills to maybe more complex wills, but a simple will, for instance, might say, I want John Doe to serve as trustee of a testamentary trust for my daughter, and that's fine. But maybe the next step of that is, well, the trustee is directed to apply for an EIN number. And at these particular times, the trustee is supposed to make distribution to the daughter. And upon these specific events at college, then that's when it needs to be totally distributed after graduating from college. Things like that. That's where, I guess that's sort of the difference between a simple will and a complex will, just a greater level of detail in how things are administered, whether in the estate or in a trust that is set up after an estate is administered.
Yeah, and we'll come back to that in future episodes as we kind of talk through the progression of how that works. But what a great distinction to think about is, if it's pretty much a straightforward distribution of assets, and largely in a case of a simple will, you're going to have a significant portion of your estate handled by beneficiary designated assets or accounts. And so that enables the will to be almost even simpler in terms of it just directs what would happen to anything that isn't subject to a beneficiary designation. And there's other tools we've talked about in the past that a transfer on death deed for a house, for example, can help transition what is often one of the larger assets in somebody's estate. And so you can do a lot of helpful things for the plan with a simple will, as long as some of the other assets are able to be transitioned easily through a beneficiary designation. So lots of interesting things there. I always find it fascinating that no matter how long I've done this, every person I meet with or every family I meet with, their scenario has a unique aspect to it. I don't know that I've ever had
Yeah.
two plans that are identical, because we have people and it's always a little unique. So it's what makes my practice so fun, and why I enjoy working with folks to help them carry out the desired outcome that they have for their families.
Yeah, and that is maybe the definition of a law practice. You understand principles that are relatable in every situation, but their application changes because the people and the facts change in every single situation. So, um, that's where the judgment and the experience of an estate planning attorney can really be beneficial to a family, because a form that you can get online and that may say a basic will, it may not be the best thing for you. It may be best to get a basic will done by an attorney, and then you'll feel better and more confident with your situation.
Absolutely. And you and I both know that the instructions that you can see on a form sometimes are very clear, but the execution of that form isn't going to get carried out with a lot of extra legwork at the appointed time. So make sure you're careful to. We would always advise consult with an attorney. It doesn't have to be us, obviously, but consult with an attorney. Make sure that the outcome that you want to have happen has the best chance of actually happening and being enforceable at your passing.
Yeah. And Seth, we've kind of talked about this before, kind of changing topics now. This is the Lifetime Legacy Lawyer podcast, and we want to provide content for the general public, educational content that tells folks about estate planning and, from my perspective, elder law and estate and trust administration for both of us. And get that info out there so that the general public is more educated about it. And I like what you say, this is your law. When you talk to clients, this is your law. We want you to know the law, all that kind of stuff. But we also want to take the Lifetime Legacy Lawyer podcast in a second direction. We're still going to be doing that general education content, but in a different direction, to kind of talk about our law practice management and how we can, we've got experience. You were sort of my mentor when I graduated from law school in 2014, and you were a contact of mine. I wanted you to hire me, but you didn't hire me, but we became friends anyway. So somehow that worked out for both of us. But you were kind of my mentor, and we started these videos of us talking and kind of chatting about, my practice, and you gave me direction on, how to take my practice, and an encouragement, really, just somebody to talk to. And we have experience. And then I think a couple of years down the road, you went from a medium-sized firm to a small firm, and you're kind of the managing attorney there at Adler Attorneys in Noblesville. So we both have, about a decade or more of small law firm management. And as a result of that, we've got experience, and we kind of like to share that and be a resource for people by posting this podcast on YouTube and Spotify and all the other places so that people can kind of gain from our experience and maybe start a conversation with attorneys all over the place about how to better serve clients and how to better manage our law practices.
Yeah, what a great summary, and what a fun journey it's been. When you kind of called me out of the blue all those years ago, and we sat down and kind of talked through things, I was a couple years into my practice and had some level of influence and leadership, I suppose, but I I wasn't making those kind of decisions, right? So the friendship kind of grew from there, and then to watch you grow, what you have been able to do, and the changes that you've met, and the folks that you provided employment to, that's a pretty big thing and an awesome responsibility. And so just getting perspective is so much fun to look back and go, oh man, I kind of forgotten I went through that process, or maybe things that you've gone through and you don't think anything about because that's just part of who it is. And everybody goes, how did you do that? So that's part of the discussion, I think, as we are building the Lifetime Legacy Lawyers content library, if you will, is just we want to share our experiences, what we've learned with other lawyers who may be thinking about going out on their own, or they're running their own small law firm. What are the things that we've learned we can share, mistakes to avoid? I think I always learn more from my failures than I do from my successes, if you will, because you don't take the time always to kind of go, what happened? How can we avoid that in the future? And those kind of things. And so just a lot of those kind of things. So thought too, it might be fun just to talk through some of the tools that we use in the office every day as well, what we find helps us make sure that we are staying on top of our caseloads and serving our clients well, which is ultimately the goal of any law firm, is to make sure that we're taking care of the clients that are in our purview. So yeah, so lots of that to talk about in the new year. I think that's going to be a lot of fun to have that topic as sort of part B of the podcast, if you will. We'll figure out logistically, if we separate the two feeds out or whatever, but we'll try to make it clear for folks so they can kind of find the content that they're looking for.
We'll figure that out, and then we'll tell people how to separate on a YouTube channel different videos that you do. That'll be great. It'll be a little tutorial.
That's right. That's right. And it is an adventure in, the technology side of all of the back end, and trying to find time to go through on the content delivery side, just to make sure that the information is able to get out there. And there's some cool stuff with artificial intelligence that helps with some of that. And so that's fun to utilize in terms of kind of producing this type of educational content, because we can learn how it works, what are the pitfalls, what might you think about bringing it into your law practice. And I know one of the document, or the document process that we use, has an artificial intelligence component to it, which is pretty cool. But how do you use that? How do you verify? How do you make sure that you're not just blindly following what the computer is telling you to do without exercising that discretion and oversight, making sure that that's done in an ethical and effective manner? It can be super efficient, but it's not always effective. And so that's kind of how I approach those types of things. So we'll get into that. We'll talk through, okay, Thomas, what did you figure out this week? One of the things I think you and I were talking about just before we got started recording is every week I try to think through my wins, my losses, and my lessons as a result. Because you do learn from your wins. That's great. You want to celebrate that. Yeah, I think you learn a lot from your losses. What are those failures? And then what are the lessons I can draw from that? So I don't want to do that. And to harken back to what we were talking about just a minute ago, your documents do get a little bit longer because you learn lessons. And so you're able to add that situation or address that situation for the next client, so they don't have to necessarily run into that situation. And we talk about those airbag provisions and things. So I'm super excited about that. Obviously, I get lit up by this kind of stuff because it's just stuff that I love doing. I love working both in the business and on the business, to kind of use that terminology, but get us to a point of, we've got a little bit of experience now. Let's share it with those who may be just a couple steps behind us.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I'm excited about it as well. A little bit of a shift in content that we'll be putting out. So I am excited about that technology discussion. My general rule of thumb for most things is if Seth is doing it technology wise, then I should probably do it, unless it's an Apple thing, and then I am lost and I can't handle it. So there is that piece of it. I'm a PC kind of guy and Android. So we'll have a diversity of opinion, perhaps, when it comes to that kind of technology needs. But yeah, it'll be some interesting stuff. You and I both love talking about law office management, technology, how to best serve clients, and client interactions, and all kinds of stuff that we'll get into in the law practice management piece of the Lifetime Legacy Lawyer podcast. So definitely excited about it.
Awesome. Well, I'm so excited about 2025, just for a number of reasons. I don't know if we've shared on the podcast, but we've actually opened up a Anderson office. We're headquartered, if you will, in Noblesville. Anderson is a sister city just up the road from us, about 30 minutes away, and we've opened up an office up there. And so just the capacity has increased a little bit, and the client service area has increased, and just really looking forward to see how we can help folks with their estate planning needs in the new year.
Yeah, that's very exciting for Adler attorneys. I'm happy for you guys, and I know you guys are going to have a tremendous 2025 with all the growth that you've had in 2024. So very excited for you.
I appreciate that. Well, Thomas, how can folks get in touch with you if they do have a question?
The best way to get in touch with me is by going to viclaw.org and selecting book a call, viclaw.org and book a call. How about you, Seth?
Well, you can visit us at noblesvilleattorney.com, which is where we are located, again, in our primary office. We do actually have the domain adlerattorneys.com as well, and that will get you to our website where you can fill out the contact us form, and that'll get us in touch with each other so we can discuss any questions that you have. So I'm really excited about this opportunity, Thomas. Thank you, as always, for your time, and we will see you next time.
Thanks, Seth.